The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change contains a myriad of negotiating blocks. Today, we will be exploring the negotiating position of the Group of 77 and China, commonly known as the G77. This bloc aims to represent the collective voices of developing states in the global negotiating process of climate change mitigation. The G77 was established in Geneva in the year 1964 at the first UN Conference on Trade and Development, held with the intent of establishing a new international economic order. The formation of the G77 was a reaction to the structural inequalities faced by developing countries in the international negotiating process. Not only were powerful states better positioned to succeed in negotiations, but they had developed the rules by which the game was played. Its namesake comes from the number of founding members, but today the G77 represents over 130 states. It is not a policy-making body, but an organisational bloc that seeks to collate shared interests and exert influence within the international negotiating process. The G77 is the largest of the UNFCCC's negotiating blocs and contains a complex and diverse array of subgroups. These groups range from the powerful oil-dealing countries of OPEC to the low-lying island states of AOSIS and the poorest of the poor, represented by the LDCs. Among many other factions, it also includes BASIC, the powerful coalition of Brazil, South Africa, India and China. The negotiating position of the G77 is strengthened by commonalities shared by its states and weakened by their disparities. It is therefore imperative to understand the key similarities and differences that appear within the G77 to fully understand its position in negotiations. The International Panel on Climate Change declared developing states as those most vulnerable to climate change. Unity in the G77 can be attributed to, but far from limited to, a shared sense of this vulnerability. However, this vulnerability is multifaceted. It does not simply arise from the ecological effects of environmental degradation, but also from a shared sense of vulnerability to the tough world of international environmental negotiations. The common divide between the global north and the global south plays a key role in creating a sense of unity within the group, and drawing on this, recognition of a structurally unequal global society carried into negotiations, acknowledging that ecological independence is asymmetrical and that the burden of responsibility should fall on those already developed. This inequality has been evolved into a concept known as common but differentiated responsibilities, a strong foundation of the G77 cohort. This concept dictates that while mitigating climate change is a common interest and an issue to all, variations in mitigation responsibility apply. This is due in no small part to the disproportionate amount of past emissions being caused by developed countries, as well as their ability to fund and adapt to a changing world that far outmatches that of developing countries. While there are philosophical merits and structural imperatives for the members of the G77 to band together, the size and disparity in member states proves an important element when assessing the negotiation position of the bloc. Differences in levels of economic growth, greenhouse gas emissions, and political power have begun to erode the G77's camaraderie. OPEC is the source of much controversy within the G77, and from the beginning exhibited signs of willingly withholding the cooperation needed to successfully navigate the negotiation process. Some commentators have argued that such disparities in membership interest begs a reassessment of the legitimacy of the group. Given that some of the more powerful and higher emitting states are capable of hiding behind the cloak of common but differentiated responsibilities that the G77 otherwise uses to protect its more vulnerable member states. These scapegoat and filibustering mechanisms are highly frustrating to the smaller, less powerful and increasingly vulnerable states of AOSIS and the LDCs. From the very beginning, the G77's goal was to guarantee the right to continued economic growth and poverty alleviation amidst calls for greenhouse gas emissions reduction. Originally, mitigation processes were seen as a hindrance to growth. However, more recently, there has been a move away from the zero-sum game towards a concept of sustainable development. An overarching recognition of common but differentiated responsibility still remains steadfast within the G77, codified in Article 3.1 of the UNFCCC, and they draw from this the need for financial aid and technological transfer. Despite the range and disparity in economic prowess between member states, they share a position grounded in a rights-based approach to distributing funds for adaptive purposes as opposed to the mechanism of donor-dominated assistance. G77 states have been instrumental in UNFCCC negotiations. Brazil's crucial role in the implementation of the Clean Development Mechanism not only demonstrates the growing power of some developing states in the international negotiation arena, but also the difficult terrain of interplay between domestic and international politics, known as the two-level game. The domestic repercussions of the Clean Development Mechanism meant that in order for Brazil to access funds, they would need to actively track and publish data on deforestation in the Amazon, no longer being able to turn a blind eye to the illegal deforestation trade and greatly upsetting domestic factions such as the Deforestation Establishment and the Landless Workers Movement. Often the main focus taken by the chair of the G77 boils down to three things: seeking technological transfer, financial aid, and monitoring the progress of Annex 1 states in their mitigation commitments. They have long held a collective stance that between 0.5 and 1% of developed countries' GDPs should be contributed to climate change-related aid, amassing to a fund of between 150 to 300 billion US dollars. While many of these negotiating positions appear progressive, subgroups of the G77 have been responsible for great setbacks. Seen as the real test of the G77, talks at COP15 in Copenhagen quickly disintegrated into procedural bickering and eventually BASIC, the powerful coalition of Brazil, South Africa, India and China, was single-handedly responsible for removing the legally binding element of the Copenhagen Accord.
As I say,
there is no doubt that commonalities remain between member states of the G77. However, what remains to be settled is the strength of such unities in the face of effective and fair climate change mitigation. While many member states of the G77 stand for strong action to combat global warming on a worldwide scale, the inclusion of states with such strong and overriding conflicts of interest will continue to slow and weaken the process.